Hi, do you think that you can handle any more forgotten classics? Shooters that failed with their release timing, super fun niche RPGs full of capes and lasers, and phenomenal fantasy strategies shaded by their more well-known and popular sequels. They are all here and waiting for you to be rediscovered. Heroes of Might and Magic is a Might and Magic spin-off and arguably one of the most important games in the entire history of gaming. Also an ugly duckling in the Heroes series, as it is usually overlooked by gamers who tend to focus on the incredible third game, sometimes fourth because it was so different than the rest of them, or like myself, are diehard second title fans. But without the first there would be no other, and even if we ignore that unquestionable fact, it's just a good game in its own right. It laid the foundations for the later titles by drawing basic gameplay concepts from New World's Computing earlier game, King's Bounty. And for the most part, the framework that it set, short of maybe the fourth entry, were largely unchanged throughout all of the Heroes' games released to date, even the one that had just been announced recently. While the story of the first game is rather basic and nowhere near as convoluted or deep as that of the later games, it's okay, as between you and I never played Heroes games for the story. I love the mix of an overall map exploration, kingdom management and tactical turn-based combat. Combat that many relegated to a simple formula of stronger is the winner or more is better. Which was wrong, as in fact a correct army composition and use of magic could offset a considerable difference of power between the two warring sides. Still, the story is there and tells a tale of Lord Morgling Iron Fist, whose name sounds like something that should be put on a bottle of an industrial grease cleaner, with him drawn on it too, standing there with his Iron Fist raised in anger because of all the sticky spillage. Anyway, Iron Fist was forced to flee his homeworld of Varn, which should be known to fans of the classic Might and Magic games, through a magic portal, barely escaping death by the hands of his evil cousin Ragnar, who usurped the throne after killing Iron Fist's father, a true ruler of the kingdom. It was a very long sentence, and I'm tired now. Stranded in a previously unknown to him land of Enroth, Iron Fist and his followers decide to face 3 other warlords fighting for control over this unruled land. The sorceress queen Lamanda, the barbarian lord Slayer and the warlock lord Alamar. A queen and 2 lords, and none of them has any land. Go figure. The goal of the game is to become victorious and conquer the Enroth, playing for your chosen side. It is usually achieved by defeating all the enemy heroes on the map and capturing their castles, but some scenarios may actually require you to fulfill a different victory condition, like finding a particular hidden artifact or accumulating a certain amount of gold. First Heroes doesn't really force the story on you too much, so most of the time you're playing it to have fun and not to really push the campaign forward. The 4 aforementioned classes all have their own appropriately themed castles and unique units that they can hire. I say units and not soldiers, cause more often than not they're not human but a different fantasy or mythical creatures. You know, griffins, gargoyles, hydras, sprites and even dragons. All of them have different stats, skills and their particular use case scenarios too. Learning all of the strategies and which units are worth stacking all the way to the moon and which skipping is a key to success. Heroes earn experience in combat too, and in time not only improve in terms of their stats of attack, defense, knowledge and magic, but also gain access to new spells if you keep working on your castles. The overall gameplay loop revolves around keeping your castle well defended and expanded, all the while exploring the map, hunting down and defeating enemy heroes, and then capturing and holding their castles too. When captured, you can naturally add them to your kingdom and use them as your own. So erect new buildings that allow for recruiting of various units for your armies, build magic guilds to supply your heroes with new and exciting spells, and raise strong and sturdy defensive structures. Other than that, you're exploring the overworld map, find and capture different mines and basic resource sources, all to develop and strengthen your kingdom. You can also collect different treasures and artifacts and engage in combat too, both with neutral creatures guarding random points on the map and enemy heroes. Whenever you are attacked or attack a random group of monsters opposing hero or a castle, the game switches to a side view tactical mode. All of your units are shown here as stacks and you can move them around on a hexagonal grid. This is also where you get to use them in battle, which same as an overworld map section is turn-based. Each turn you can move one unit and then order it to attack if possible. And then the opponent's turn starts and follows the same rules. Rinse and repeat until only one of you is left standing and the other fertilizes the battlefield with his/her rotting remains. Other than casting combat and support spells, heroes don't take direct part in a battle. They gain experience from combat though, in a typical RPG manner no less, but we've already discussed how it can be used. The first Heroes of Might and Magic is truly a unique and too often ignored experience, that many more of us gamers should give a chance, because while it may not look great anymore, it's still a lot of fun to play. Blam blam blam, bra 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 bra, pew 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 pew, kerplunk. Blam Machinehead, also known as Machinehead, is a post-apocalyptic sci-fi hovercraft 3D first-person shooter like no other. It's a fast-action intense shooter that will keep you on the edge of your seat all the way through, shooting and killing everything that you will come across. Like, literally everything. If it will show up on your screen, don't think about it, shoot at it and forget that it ever was there in the first place. It may seem a bit mindless, but it's hella fun, so you will hardly find yourself thinking about it for too long. But let's start where the most things do, so at the very beginning. You're Kimberly Stride, a beautiful, smart and most importantly cool named scientist turned world savior in the making. And you're working on the antivirus to combat an evil technovirus/DNA that's slowly but gradually eating up the world and everything on it, biological or otherwise. While you would have no doubt cracked the code and find solution if given time, your assistant's betrayal leaves you in a situation where you find yourself in a desperate race against the clock to stop the spread of the virus. You do so in an armed to the teeth, or armed to the license plate I should say really, armored hovercraft known as Vorpal Blade. Pretty cool name, right? Anyway, the fight will eventually take you into the confrontation with the creator of the virus, a rogue AI going by the name of Machinehead that's bent on humanity's destruction. While it all sounds a bit out there, the game itself is rather fun to go through, even if it sometimes touches rather deep themes of the cost of a human survival and ethical implications of scientific experimentation, especially work on sentient and intelligent beings. Gameplay mainly comprises of going through different large and brown-looking stages, annihilating anything and everything that comes your way, be it turrets, vehicles, or even numerous different techno-mutated creatures like gigantic spiders or flies, which if you think about it should be more into going for each other than you, but whatever, game logic. While the enemies are varied and aplenty, you have a pretty decent arsenal of weapons to grab and use against them. So while you start with a chain gun and missiles only, soon enough you'll pick up additional tools of destruction like homing missiles, flamethrower, rapid laser, grenade launcher and a smart bomb, among others. Point is, you won't be lacking in a firepower as much as you won't be in targets to use them all at. Keep in mind, however, that the ammo for most of this is severely limited, so using them smartly is a key to success. Or to survival, depending what situation you'll find yourself in. Simply put, the rule of the thumb says to keep the big guns for the big bet and use the small ones for everything else instead. Notice how I've mentioned stages being brown before? Well, because they are. They look as if the graphic artists were given a palette to work with that consisted of, I don't know, 10-15 unique colors and twice as many shades of brown. So they did what they could with it, meaning used them on everything all around. It's a minor gripe, and truth be told, one that could be lore explained by the corruption caused by the virus, but it's still something that pops as soon as you start playing. As fun as Blam Machinehead may be, it was released in an unlucky for its time, as it was a year when literally dozens of other, more notable and flashy, and probably less brown, action game released. So stuff like Duke Nukem 3D, Descent 2, Tomb Raider, Archimedean Dynasty or Quake. Although that last is not the best example, as it was equally as brown, maybe even more so. Still, Blam is still really fun if you give it a chance, and a game still worth revisiting, especially if you've never played it before. Freedom Force vs. the Third Reich is a sequel to the first game released in 2002, which I've not had a chance to cover in my videos yet. And it's a sci-fi superhero tactical strategy with role-playing elements that's so much fun you wouldn't believe. In fact, I'm convinced that after watching the video you'll be disappointed in yourself for not hearing of it when it originally released, as you would have purchased it in an instant. I usually don't start with the presentation, but I feel that with this game in particular, there's no going around it. And while it neither is, nor ever was spectacular in any real way, it's not bad or downright ugly either. But what it most definitely is very comic book-like in its design. So the colors are popping, the characters both, good and bad, all have their own unique, often hilariously designed costumes in most unfitting palettes imaginable, and the sound design is classic Adam West Batman TV series worthy. So you know, all the kapows, booms, kerplunks and other swishes and things, good stuff. All in all, what I'm trying to say here is that the game looks, feels and sounds like a comic book. Or at least how I would imagine a comic book to sound like. With that out of the way, let's talk gameplay. And ladies and gentlemen, it's fantastic. But once again, in an unexpected plot twist, I'm gonna keep you hanging here with all that anticipation and we'll talk story now. You know, to build an excitement for what's to follow. So, a fantastically named supervillain, Nuclear Winter, used even more cool named Time Master's body, yep, just his frame, to steal nuclear missiles to then later on use them to ignite the conflict between United States and the USSR. Fortunately, Freedom Force manages to stop him, but in the process they alter the timeline and find themselves living in the world where Axis powers won the Second World War. Now, I don't have to tell you how shitty of a time it would have been, but if you want to know more, there's this super fun TV series on streaming called The Man in the High Castle. If you get the chance, check it out. To set things right, our heroes will have to travel back in time to try to overthrow the Nazi regime before things get out of the hand and to set the timeline straight back on its original track. Sounds fun, right? It is. The game is a top-down real-time tactical strategy role-playing mixture that sees you leading a team of up to 4 superheroes at once from a stable of musclemen and women on missions set on nearly entirely destructible 3D maps. I mean, you'll be throwing cars, using lampposts to maul villains into submission or even collapse entire buildings on them. To simplify, if you can see something, anything when playing, chances are that it can be either used somehow in combat or entirely destroyed. The missions themselves are quite varied and fun and can be a lot of things, from defeating of a certain number of enemies on the map, through saving civilians or captured heroes, all the way to protection of a particular spot or even an entire town. Each of the heroes naturally has his or her own iconic powers and they can be used in and out of combat. The controls here are dead simple and the powers are chosen by right-clicking on the object or enemy and selecting which one you'd like to use. And these are naturally a mixture of box standard and expected from a game like that: super strength, laser shots, flying and the likes, and those that are a bit more creative, like the ability to turn enemies into vases. Yeah, you heard that right, vases. Or even taking over control over enemy bodies and many others. What's more, you naturally get to create your own hero from ground up, you know, your avatar so to speak, and he or she can have so many different powers. I mean, not only you get to pick through literally dozens baked into the game, but you can even create your own, mix and match those that are already there, and all of that with custom sounds too. It's great. Naturally, you cannot make a Superman straight away, as these choices that you have when it comes to skills and powers available are limited by the character points. And same as all other heroes in the game, yours too will be able to collect more of these and use them between missions to either upgrade his or her already existing abilities or add new powers. It's a very satisfying progression system, especially if you're eyeing a particular ability that is very expensive but seems like a literal game changer, cause getting it eventually feels like a true achievement. I'm sure that I've caught your interest and you're wondering now how could you ever have missed such a gem. Well, most of us did, and even I discovered it a few years after it originally came out. For a much more attractive price, mind you, but still, I could have been kicking Axis asses years before I eventually did. So now I'm gonna surprise you and tell you the best thing about the Freedom Force. Cause believe it or not, it's not what I set up to this point. The game is entirely open and modding friendly, allowing gamers to create tons of additional content for it for free. Powers, missions, campaigns, graphics, sounds, everything. And if you let the people be creative, many of them are. And Freedom Force is no exception, so even after you complete its campaign once or twice, there's still many more adventures awaiting you to download and play online. Avernum is a remake of Spider Software's 1995 Exile Escape from the Pit and tells a tale of a group of adventurers who have been banished from the surface world by the world-ruling empire to the gigantic underground cave system that's been serving as jail. What the living overall don't know though is that over the years, the caves that have been treated as the place to exile the unwanted and unnecessary have turned into Australia. I mean, they've developed a society of their own, and one that perhaps is not having as good as the top does, but is most definitely prospering and sprawling. They've built 6 large cities and numerous smaller settlements, so there is a lot to see there, explore, and most importantly have adventures in. And since there are no artificial borders preventing you from picking a particular direction to traverse in, the Avernum feels not only entirely open, but also free to explore. It's worth pointing out here that also means that you can direct yourself straight for the most difficult areas of the game and be turned into bloody piles of goo near instantly. So I would strongly advise following the natural feeling progression path rather than running into the enemies that can kill you with the force of their fart only. Still, it's worth keeping in mind that the option is there and the choice in the end is entirely yours. Most characters that you'll meet you'll be able to talk to and learn something from. And when I say most, I don't mean quest givers and shopkeepers only, I literally mean most. So farmers, travelers, royalty and anyone else, they can all be interacted with verbally for better or worse. The plot of Avernum progresses in a very natural way, not pulling you in by the hand along numerous important stops, but letting you wander around and discover/figure out everything on your own and at your own pace. In fact, out of the 3 large main quest chains that you should take throughout your adventure, finishing the game requires only completing one of them. The first out of the 3 that you get, you don't actually really get anywhere, it's just something that you know that you have to do, and when you start pulling the thread, it will envelop and take you on a hell of a ride in a very natural way. While you only really have to complete one of the three, doing more rewards you a more satisfying game ending, so if only possible, it's worth not to rob yourself out of the experience. Other than these three, there are obviously countless side quests, and these are shorter and simpler, but still a lot of fun. It's actually an overarching theme of Avernum that is very often lost by those who bounce off of its presentation. But if you give the game time, allow yourself to be immersed in its lore and story, and can ignore a rather simplistic even by 2000 standards presentation, then you will most likely have tons of fun, leading your party through an incredible adventure and seeing them grow and get better. Since we're on the characters, the progress for their growth is rather spectacular too. There are numerous skills that they can develop, and these are not limited in any way, be it by class or race. Some of them are skills that the characters can use personally, others may benefit a few or even an entire party. Each party member can learn up to 18 spells with 3 levels of mastery each, and each of these levels strengthens the corresponding magic considerably. The third clearly offers the biggest boost, much bigger than the second in fact, but it cannot be trained by a regular teacher and requires you to find a special location. These are usually very well hidden and rarely connected to any questlines, incentivizing you to explore on your own. Combat in Avernum is of my absolute most favorite kind, so tactical and turn-based, giving you plenty enough time to plan out your strategies and put them into action, rather than having you fight with controls trying to pull off fireball after fireball nervously while being attacked yourself by a pack of buddies. Do buddies come in packs? Maybe covens, groups, mobs, or even like crows, murder. Murder of buddies. Let me know if you know, naturally in the comments below. While Avernum's presentation overall is rather disappointing, even if incomparably better than that of the original, it's something that I can easily live with, and I'm convinced that anyone who'll give it a couple of hours could too. But there's one thing that's incredibly annoying about it, and something that I take for granted in all games that I play today, even those that came out years before Avernum did. And it's the quest log, or in this case in particular, lack thereof. I mean, if you want to remember everything about each task that you get and not miss any details, it's best that you sit to play the Avernum with a notebook, pen and will to take notes all the time, everywhere and without fail. It's something most gamers won't be into today, but those that will muster the strength to do so will be in for hell of an adventure. The Punisher is a third-person action-adventure shooter and a hell of a game if... well, we'll get to that if in a few minutes, so bear with me. Given how shoddy most superhero games were by 2005, and since we've not had pretty great Marvel Ultimate Alliance titles yet, the Punisher had no right to be any good. And yet, it kinda was. Partly because of its brutal and action-packed gameplay, and partly because of its story being written by Garth Ennis and Jim Palmiotti, well-known and renowned comic book authors. The game begins with a cinematic introduction showing the Punisher sending several Yakuza footmen into the land of Eternal Z's, after which he is apprehended by the police and transferred to Riker Island, where he is interrogated by a pair of cops. A large part of the story is then played out as a series of interactive flashbacks in which you, playing as Frank Castle himself, are disassembling the Gnutchi crime family, dealing with the Russian arms dealers, stopping Kingpins and Eternal Sun clan members' evil plots, among others. After all of which, the timeline sets itself comfortably back in the present, and from that point onward, the game carries on in real time. The Punisher is a very brutal game, which I suppose is fitting as the character was too. But what I mean by that here is not only that he kills a lot of different bad guys, but also that there are over 70 different interrogations /torture scenarios in which you're making them quote-unquote talk in a way that would make all the Geneva Convention regulators blush and slash or faint. Perhaps it's a bit gratuitous and unnecessary, but given the character's background, it's also not unexpected and something that is lore-friendly, regardless of how that sounds. Especially that these interrogations are necessary to find bits and pieces of the plot that will push the story ahead, and skipping them is just not an option. If you thought that that was all though, it's far from it. Because the Punisher, being the bad mofo that he is, has a selection of numerous finisher moves with which he can pretty much one-hit kill all enemies short of bosses. And there are also even special spots scattered around the levels offering environmental finishers too. So, it's one of those games that the young and those with weaker stomachs would do best to skip. I mean, stuff like having someone's face eaten by the piranhas, their head crushed in the press, or kicking them out of balconies is nothing unusual in the game and some of the least gruesome ways to dispose of the enemies. Clearly, a lot of thought went into all of these, and as someone who likes his action games to be full of, well, action, and who is not easily upset with a sight of fictional and clearly not real-life violence either, I had a lot of fun with the Punisher. But if you do, it's definitely not the title for you. Frank Castle can carry up to 3 weapons at once, 2 one-handed and a single two-handed one, and even dual-wield some of them too. And these are a plethora of real-life guns, from .45 ACP pistols through M16 assault rifles to rocket launchers and anything in between. So mowing through countless enemies with a huge M61 or cooking them in fresh medium steaks with a flamethrower is not something very rare. In fact, since you're scored in how many enemies you can kill and in how few times you get shot yourself, leaving a small town worth of bodies behind is not only not unlikely, but also a preferred outcome of each mission. So, the more of them that you kill, the higher your score multiplier goes, allowing you to mass some sick numbers. But if you get hit, the score gathered is added to your overall and the multiplier is reset back to 0. And you wanna score big, because high scores allow you to invest in very helpful upgrades, like high capacity max, more ammo overall, increased accuracy and damage, and attachments for some of the guns. You know, fun stuff. Punisher's presentation is a mixed bag really. The main character is excellent, his model is of very high for the time polygon count, and even comes with 3 beautiful skins covering 1980s, 90s and 2000s character looks and a definite graphical highlight of the game. The enemies and weapons are great too, but the backgrounds and environments are average at best. And if you happen to play the Punisher on PlayStation 2, then they are downright ugly and ancient looking. So keep that in mind while picking your platform of choice. The sounds are decent, but that's pretty much all I can tell you about them, since shouts, explosions, grunts and screams all sound fine, but are also not anything we've not heard in countless other titles. Overall, there's nothing to pick here really, at least on PC, but also very little to praise other than the obscenely brutal gameplay loop. The controls are a bit odd too, not bad mind you, but will definitely take a minute to get used to. When you do, however, and if you don't mind a bit sadistic and most of the time pointless violence in your action games, then it will be worth it. In any other case, however, The Punisher may be a game for you to ignore and focus on other, less 18+ titles. While many of the games may have been the victims of when they released, usually surrounded by other and bigger games, it doesn't change the fact that they're all not only worth remembering but also revisiting and replaying. I hope that you enjoyed me reminding you about them and that you'll find time over this Christmas period to at least check one of them out. Either way, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell to stay updated about more long-lost hidden gaming treasures and my other usual content. For me, however, this is all, so stay safe, have fun, and I'll see you next time.